session, which is on the portion of Vayigash from Torah Avah, I would call it answering unanswered biblical questions. Answering unanswered biblical questions. So I'm opening up my Chumash, and thank God Shuli is with us. What would I do without Shuli? I'd be in a lot of trouble. And Shuli not only helps me write, but helps me think, make sure I get it right. And I'm very, very grateful. So, and Toby's grateful for a deep, deep friendship and love of Shuli, the whole shul. In this week's portion,
yes.
Joseph, now we'll mute everyone. In this week's portion, I'll speak for about 10 minutes and then we'll open it up. In this week's portion in Vayigash, Joseph reveals himself in chapter 45. And what it says there is that Joseph could not refrain himself when he saw how Judah, the same Judah who played a very central role in selling Joseph, that very same Judah, cutting through the red tape, that same Judah came to the defense of Benjamin. Now, when we think about it, Judah was the primary heir, being the son not only of Jacob, but of Leah. Reuven was not going to be the heir because Reuven had slept with his father's wife. That's a no-no. And Shimon and Levi were not going to be the inheritors because they had killed all the males in Shechem. So the next in line was Judah. As a matter of fact, we, all of us, except the priest and the Levites, we are descendants of Judah. Now, Judah was a very complicated, very central character, and he was the one, when Joseph was in the pit, he said, let's sell him. Sell him? Sell him to the Ishmaelites? That probably meant that he was going to be chattel. It's like, God forbid, women who are sold across the border and abused, God forbid. God forbid. And so, but Judah was the one who said, let's sell him. Why did he sell Joseph? Because Joseph was the eldest son from Jacob and Rachel. There was Joseph and then Benjamin. So his key competitor was Joseph. And bearing in mind that Joseph was favored by his father, he gives him a coat of many colors and he has these dreams and so on. And his father, if one reads the text very carefully, seemed to go along with the dreams. So Judah wants to get rid of him. So he sells him. Now, given a second chance, Judah comes to the defense of Benjamin. And in the absence of Joseph, who is Judah's primary challenger? His primary challenger is none other than Benjamin, because Benjamin, without Joseph, is the one left from Jacob and, most important, from Rachel. So when he sees that Judah was really fighting for the life of his brother Benjamin, he's overcome with emotion. He sees, wait a minute, Judah really has changed his way. He's repented. And so the text says in chapter 45, sentence 1, that Joseph couldn't refrain himself at that point. And he says, I want to be alone with these men. No one knows that he's really the brother. And then in chapter 45, which we'll see on the screen, sentence 2, the Torah describes Vayitain et kolo bivichi, and Joseph put forth his voice in tears. And bichi really means he was sobbing. I like that translation. He sobs. His sobs were aloud, and they were so loud, Vayishma'u Mitzrayim, that the Egyptians could hear. Vayishma bet Paro. And so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. And so he's crying. He cries out, and what does he say? And this is chapter 45, sentence 3. Vayomer Yosef Elechav. And Joseph says to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph.
Have you, Joseph?
Ha'od avichai, is my father still alive? And then it says, V'lo yochlu achiv la'anototo. His brothers couldn't answer him, ki nivhalu mipanav, because they were just frightened, or the translation here is dumbfounded on account of him. Now, let's look at that sentence for a moment. If I could face everyone for a moment, we'll be going back and forth, surely. When one looks at Joseph's revealing himself, he says again, and Joseph said, here are his words, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Ha'od avichai, is Abba still alive? And when one looks at that, one may be able to discern that there is a sort of indirect criticism that Joseph is leveling at the brothers. He says, for example, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph, but he doesn't say, I am Joseph, your brothers. He doesn't say that. He says, Ani Yosef. And then he asks a question. He says, Ha'od avichai, is my father alive? And one would imagine that when the brothers hear this, they are thinking to themselves, is my father alive? Jacob is also our father. Wouldn't Joseph have been better off asking, Ha'od avinu chai, is our father still alive? Doesn't say that. He says, Ha'od avi chai, is my father alive, as if it's my father and not your father. And when the brothers hear that, v'lo yachlu lanototo, they couldn't respond because they were afraid, ki nivhalu mipanav. Now, in the next sentence, let's look at the next sentence. I mean, imagine brothers who had not seen each other, not spoken to each other for a long time. The first time they speak, it's the road is a little bumpy. So let's take a look at 45:4. The brothers don't respond. V'lo yochlu lanototo, they couldn't answer him. Then it says, Vayome Yosef el Echav. It does say, but this is not Joseph. This is the narrator. And Joseph said to his brothers, Gishu na elai, come close to me. That term Gishu is found all over here. It begins the portion of the week by Yigash elav Yehuda, when Judah draws close to Joseph. So Joseph says to his brother, Gishu na elai, come close to me. Vayigashu, and they came close. Vayome, and he says, Ani Yosef achicha. So he, if you will, softens his first statement when he said, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. This time, when he's speaking for the second time to the brothers, he says, Ani Yosef, he does add, Achicha, your brother, Hashem echartem oti mitzrayma, you sold me to Egypt. Now he softens a little bit in the next sentence. He says, Va'ata al teyatzvu v'yicha beinechem ki v'chartem oti. Don't be upset that you sold me to Egypt. Why shouldn't you be upset? Ki lemichya shlachani Elohim lifnechem. Let's look at the English now. Do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me hither. But it was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. I mean, the truth of the matter is, if I can face everyone, he's saying something like, you may have been guilty for selling me, but it's God who is behind this all. God sent me. But I'm more interested in the Joseph who the second time around says, I am Joseph, your brothers. But he still never says, he never goes back to when he had previously said, Ha'od avichai, is my father alive? He doesn't repeat that question. And that question, where Joseph asks, Ha'od avichai, when he reveals himself after 22 years of separation, and everybody knows what the brothers did to Joseph, he finally is going to say, I'm Joseph, your brothers. But his words, which were formulated as a question, was, Ha'od avichai, is my father, is Jacob still alive? And for that question, there was no answer. This is an example of a question in the Torah where the Torah does not offer an answer. In fact, the Torah says, "V'lo yachlu la'anoto," they couldn't answer. So I'd like to go back to the first time a question is asked in the Torah, where we have the common denominator, where the seeds are planted for such a phenomenon. And that brings us back to the Garden of Eden story. And in the Garden of Eden, God says, don't eat of these trees. We all know Adam and Eve eat from the trees. And then in chapter 3, sentence 9, we'll put this up on the board. After they eat from the tree, so they hear the voice of God, Adam and Eve. And in sentence 9, Vayikra Adonai Elohim el ha'adam. And the Lord God called out to Adam, Vayomer lo, and he said to Adam, Ayeka, where are you? Where are you? And Adam answers, Vayomer, and he says, there is a response here. Et kolcha shamati bagan, I heard, O God, your voice. Vo'ira, and I was frightened. Ki erom anochi, because I am naked, vo'echabe, whatever that means. But if I could face everyone, he's not answering the question, ayeka. He doesn't answer that question. He doesn't answer that question. God had said to Adam, ayeka, where are you? Well, God knew the Garden of Eden. He could have given him the lines of the axis, whatever it's called, a little navigation direction. Here I am, and say I'm under the tree that you told me. It doesn't say that. God asks ayeka, and it seems to be a question that's not being answered. As a matter of fact, it said that the first Lubavitcher Rebbe was imprisoned, and he was imprisoned and found a couple of Jews there. And the Jews said to him, we want to believe, but the first question in the Torah, God asks ayeka. I mean, is it possible that God did not know where Adam and Eve were, that he's asking ayeka? So I want to spend a little time on this, if I could face everyone. Let's spend just a few moments on that first question. When God says to Adam, ayeka, where are you? And I'd like to suggest that this question, the first question in the Torah, and the common denominator to understand ideas in the Torah, words in the Torah, the headquarters of the meaning, is the first time it's found. So first questions are very, very key. When God says to Adam, ayeka, it was a rhetorical question. All of these types of questions are rhetorical questions. And in the rhetoric, in the rhetorical query, there is an expression of upset. When God says, ayeka, where are you? He doesn't want to know where Adam is physically. He knows where Adam is physically. But he's turning like a father or like a mother turns to a child who had upset them and had gone wrong, and God says to Adam, ayeka, vu bistu, what have you done? I give you the Garden of Eden, and I ask you to refrain just from eating from these trees. That's the one thing you can't do, and that's the one thing you do. Ayeka, what is your worth? What are you? Who are you? What are you? What's happened to you? Ayeka. And I'd like to argue, and this is the essence of my message, I'd like to argue that in essence, Adam is not just Adam. In fact, Maimonides writes that the first 3 chapters, actually 4 chapters of the Bible, he argues, are not chapters that factually occurred. The Garden of Eden is not literal. It's teaching general lessons, which we've gone through. Still remember one of the sessions we had in talking about the Garden of Eden, where everyone here was especially creative in understanding what it's all about. The story of Adam is not just the story of Adam. We all come from Adam. It's the story of the nature of the human being. And in the biblical text, putting aside the science, which the Torah agrees with, the Torah is not a book of science, it's a book of theology, it's a book of life conditions. What we're being told is every human being, you, me, everyone who comes from Adam, God is constantly saying to us, Ayeka, where are you? Have you reached your full potential? Are you getting it right? You know, they say that when we get up into heaven, that we're going to be shown frame by frame everything we did in our lives. This is sort of like a Musa thing, which I'm not into at all, but I could see my Rebbe's telling me this. And then the Rebbe says, yeah, let me talk about myself. They would show me frame by frame what I did. And then there's another parallel framing of the movie, frame by frame, where they're showing at every moment what I should have done. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That could get serious. It's like when my father said to me when I was a kid, he said, for me, I don't tell you everything, I see everything. That can get you a little nervous, especially when you're a teenager in a camp. Get you very, very nervous. So to every human being, God is asking Ayeka. Now, Ayeka is the first question in the Torah, and it's a question that's left unanswered. That is an example of a question that in every generation, every human being is asked to answer that question, to answer that unanswered question in the Bible. Ayeka, where are you? Where are you? And that's the first question God asks. Now, if we were face to face, but I'm on Zoom here, what's the first question that a human being asks? This is not a question that God asks of us. There's another question that a human being asks. And that's after Cain kills Abel in chapter 4, if we can put that up on the screen. And in chapter 4, Cain kills Abel. And what does it say? Vayomer Adonai El Cain, sentence 9. And the Lord said to Cain, now God is asking the second question that God asks, E hevel ochicha, where is Abel your brother? Vayomer. And he responds, Lo yodati. Cain says, I do not know. And this is the first question a human being asks in the Bible. Hashomer Achi Onochi. I'm sorry about my throat. Hashomer Achi Onochi. Am I my brother's keeper? Now, when you look at the beginning of the sentence, that's God speaking. God says to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And the response here, Cain is responding, but he responds with a question. And his question is, Lo yodati, I do not know. I have nothing to do with it. Hashomer ochi onochi, if I could face everyone. Hashomer ochi onochi. Am I my brother's keeper? You know, in my days at the Bayit, Hillel Jaffe, God bless him, really is so central to our Bayit. He has great aesthetic sensitivity. So for many years, the Bayit had no curtain, and finally we put up a curtain. It was done by a magnificent artist, and we wanted to put words from the Bible representing the mission, the philosophy of the Bayit. And he asks me which word should go up. I said, how about putting up the words, am I my brother's keeper? So Hillel said, that's fair, am I my brother's keeper? But in the Bible, there is no answer. And my response would be, that is another example of a question in the Bible that is not answered in the Bible. And the answer to that question is, that's the whole Bible. That's the whole Torah. The whole Torah is meant as an answer to declare we are our sisters and brothers' keepers. And it's not only the whole Torah, it's in every generation. every person, we're constantly being asked, are we our siblings? Are we our siblings' keeper? And hopefully we can respond and say, we are our siblings' keepers. These are examples of the God question, Ayeka, where are you? Or Cain's first human question, am I my brother's keeper? Where there is no answer in the Torah, because this is the way the Torah is challenging all of us in every generation, past, present, and future. Can we respond to Ayeka? Here I am. I'm doing the best that I can do. I'm doing the best that I can do. If we do the best that we can do, that's all that's expected of us. Even if we don't overcome, doing the best we can do is dayenu. That's enough. It's more than enough. Can we respond? Yes, I am my brothers. I am my sisters' keepers. So let's go back to the text from Vayigash, back to chapter 45, where, I don't need a screen here, where, okay, so we'll take a look at it. Chapter 45, sentence 3. Joseph is going back to his brethren, and he sees how Judah had stood up for him. In a certain sense, Judah was saying, I am my brother's keeper. I am my brother's keeper. That's what Judah was saying. And Joseph looks at them and says, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Ha'od avi chai. Is Tata still alive? Is my father still alive? And more deeply, is my father still alive? One can look at that word father and understand it uppercase. Uppercase may not be just literally Jacob, my father. We talk about God as our father. We also talk about God as our mother. God is Ava Rachaman, the father, the merciful one. The merciful one, Rachamim, comes from the word rechem, the womb, the love of the womb, which is one of my favorite teachings, that it's unconditional and infinite. So I want to read to you from the end of this book, Open Up the Iron Door, which is a memoir on the Soviet Jewry movement. And at the end, I write as follows. With the help of God, the movement, the Soviet Jewry movement, you remember the Soviet Jewry movement? There were 3 million people trapped behind the Iron Curtain. Unfortunately, Putin has taken Russia so far south. In many ways, even today, it's worse than it used to be under the Soviet Empire. But when we were pushing for the freedom of Soviet Jewry, all of you were part of the demonstrations, tens of millions of people around the world. How I wish there would be that kind of grassroots movement fighting anti-Semitism. If you would have asked the activists in the 60s and the 70s and said, 30, 40 years from now, almost 2 million Soviet Jews will be free. 1.5 million will be in Israel. 400,000 will be in America, 100,000 in Europe. We would have said, are you nuts? It can't be. It's not going to happen. But it's happened. It's happened. And so we write, with the help of God, the movement had a good ending. The meeting of Jews from the East, Soviet Union, with Jews from the West. The rendezvous echoed the biblical moment when Joseph and his brothers meet after 22 years of separation. When they finally see each other, Joseph asks, is my father still alive? Ha'od avichai. The question is left unanswered in the Bible. It was left to our sisters and brothers from the Soviet Union thousands of years later to respond, Od Avinu Chai, yes, our father is still alive. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel lives. Now we're all familiar with the song, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael, and then we say, Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu Chai, Od Avinu, Od Avinu, sung all over the world, Od Avinu Chai. And most of the songs that we sing, Shlomo, of blessed memory, introduced this, are lifted from the Torah. If one looks throughout the Torah and the prophets, never do we find these words, Od Avinu Chai. Our Father is still alive. We never find that. We find the question where Joseph asks, Ha'od Avi Chai. Is my father still alive? As we said before, he doesn't even say Avinu. Is my father still alive? And by the way, the word is Od. Od is a term which I believe is found in the Torah to say Od against all odds, he's saying, against all odds, where Abba suffered psychologically, emotionally, that the son was gone, his favorite son. Ha'od Avichai, is my father still alive? And that's why we sing thousands of years later, Am Yisrael Chai. These are our words. You'll never find the three words Am Yisrael Chai in all of the Bible, all of the prophets, early, later, never says Am Yisrael Chai. We're responding, Am Yisrael Chai, Od Avinu Chai. Our Father is still alive. These are examples of questions in the Bible that are not answered in the Bible. But the challenge is given to us that we have to answer to the question of Ayeko, where are we? We have to respond, Hineni, here I am, ready to do, ready to accomplish, ready to reach for the stars to do the best I can do. We have to respond. I'm talking again to myself, letting you listen, because we're going to be asked this question. The question of Cain. Hashomer achi anochi, am I my brother's, my sister's keeper? We have to be able to respond, yes, yes. Or Joseph's questions, ha'od avichai, and sing out. I have memories of singing Am Yisrael Chai, Od Avinu Chai. I remember when we went to Auschwitz. When we went to Auschwitz back in the late 80s and 90s, and we would come out after raising the voice that the souls of the murdered, that they should be sacrosanct, they should not be violated as they were being violated. Then, as you know, we would, underneath the sign, the Arbeit macht frei, Am Yisrael Chai, Od Avinu Chai. When we were in Argentina, we went to the Pink House. You know what the Pink House is? The Pink House is their White House. With all that Argentina did in not investigating what happened at the Yamia, the largest attack in the exile against the Jewish community, 85, 86, policemen were murdered. Oh, Davinu Chai. And I guess it's my blessing we always be able to sing out and say, here we are, ready to do. Ayeka, here we are, Hineni. That we be able to say, we are our brothers and sisters' keepers. We are their keepers. My favorite sentence in the Torah is when Joseph says, Et achai anochi mevakesh. I'm looking for my brothers. I'm looking for my sisters. I'm going to stop here, get your reaction, and then if we have time, I want to show you one other unanswered question that's answered actually in the prophets of this week's Parsha in the book of Yechezkel, the book of Ezekiel. So please, any thoughts on this Torah? Shuli, help me out, please.
I'm sorry, I turned away for a second.
I do have a question.
Yes.
You know, when Yosef says, is my father alive? Why does he have to ask that? Why did he go all those years without reaching out to find if his father was alive?
Yes.
And
yeah, I don't have any. That's a $64,000 question.
And when he said to his brothers, and you sold me, they didn't sell him. They put him in the pit.
Right.
They didn't take him out to sell him. So,
right.
Maybe he's saying, is my father alive? Is he still for me, even though I didn't reach out to him? But is he still yearning for me?
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's a beautiful thought. It's a beautiful thought. And the way you're interpreting it, Tova, as usual, so wonderfully, it's almost a self-critical question. After all that I did to Abba, but this is the power of the Torah. It's simple words, but the words are such depth. As I get older, I like simple. I like simple. It's too complicated and
Well, I think, can I say something, Avi?
of course.
I think that you're ascribing too much to Joseph, really. When a person, I'm sorry, is under stress, like Jethro, he was a slave and he had other things to do. You somehow don't think about where you come from. You just have to take each day as it comes. And then when he finally saw his brothers, then everything came back to him. And then again, you can't just pick up the phone and say, "Hi, Dad, I'm here." So I would think that with Joseph being too busy trying to just maintain himself to be alive, it's understandable that he wouldn't think of other things until it was he was brought face to face with his brothers. That makes more sense.
Yeah. Permit me. My father used to say that there is a rabbinic teaching. Really, thank you for that comment, Stell. A rabbinic teaching that the two looked alike, Joseph and Jacob. So when you looked at Joseph, you thought you were looking at Jacob, and the brothers had been looking at him, and didn't say, "Hey, wait a minute, you look like Dad. This is Abba." And that's why Joseph responds. He's reading into it homiletically, where Joseph says, "Ha'od is my father still alive?" And then the sentence says they couldn't answer him, "Kiniv halumi panav," because they were afraid of his face. They looked at his face. Goodness. The idea being that something was missing, that this is the reverse side, that wasn't being self-critical, he was being critical of them. What do you think of the idea of the unanswered question? And it's left to us to answer those questions as we move forward. Anyone? Any thoughts?
Rabbi,
May
I think Stuart wants to say something.
Of course, Zalman.
There's two questions I ask you, okay?
Yes.
Right? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Remember, two things happened. First, I'll talk about Cain and I'll talk about Joseph. First, I'll tell you about Joseph. Joseph's father knew that he had a God. His other brothers that were from Rachel. He had to take care of them. But his father knew that his other brothers really hated him, and yet he sent him out to take care of him. That's one thing. The second thing is that Cain and Cain was maybe what I think is that Cain didn't really understand the word of sacrifice. He was working with his father in cultivating crops. He gave him the crops. He maybe didn't know what a sacrifice really meant, because God said, "Your sacrifice is not good enough for me." Now Cain can say, "Why is not my sacrifice good enough for you? What is this all about?" And then, so you see, God knew that when God knew something else. He knows people's emotions. He felt, he could see that Cain had jealousy in his heart, because Abel was all right, but I'm not all right. Is that, and you say, "Well, what does this sacrifice mean? Why am I not all right?" He didn't say that to God, right? He said, "Why am I not all right?" That's a good question he should have had. Now forget about killing his brother. Because God knew that was going to happen to Cain. He knew that was Cain's. God knew that Cain felt that way, and he couldn't stop him. That's God brought out. You understand? Why? Well, I helped my father cultivate the crops. Is that not good enough for you? I'm not good enough for you? That's what Cain could have said too.
Right.
But then you think that's why that's the question.
Right.
Why did he take Adam? Because Adam had to give another child, Seth.
Yeah.
Because after all, Cain was helping his father cultivate the crops. He gave him the crops. Weren't good enough.
Right. No, that's absolutely. That's a good analysis, Salman. Excellent analysis. I just want to end by thank you by looking. Yeah, no, it was what you said is plenty good enough, better than good enough. Um, I'd like to take the prophetic portion that we're going to read this week. It's from Yechezkel 37. But before I do so, just facing everyone, basically the story of Genesis is the story of broken families. And when the Torah talks about brokenness, it reaches its sharpness when the brothers, I mean, in the end, the brothers make peace. But when we think about the families that are fractured, there is one side that is led by Judah, and the other side is led by Joseph. That's what it is. It's this battle between the two sides. That's what we're reading about. That's what we're reading about. And the question is whether we can, in every generation, unify ourselves. When we think about, for example, let's go back to the time of the kingdoms. So there was the kingdom of Saul. Let's take it from the kingdom of David. The kingdom of David was the first kingdom from Judah. It was from Judah. And David was the king of everyone. So the land was united. That was David. And he was followed by Solomon, also one king. Shlomo, from the word shalom. Shalom means there was unity in the land, or David is the beloved one. But after the kingdom of Shlomo, there was a split. And the split was that there emerged two kingdoms, as we know. There was the kingdom of the south in the Jerusalem area. That's called the kingdom of Judah. There we are, Judah. And then there was the kingdom of the north. And where did the kingdom of the north come from? They're really called the kingdom of basically the descendants of Joseph. It's the kingdom of Ephraim. That's Joseph's son. So when we look at the prophets, the Bible itself talks about the tension between Judah and Joseph. And suddenly when we get to the prophets, we're talking about the tension between Jerusalem, between Judah and the rest of the country and the 10 tribes. And in the end, the 10 tribes are exiled and all havoc breaks loose. Now let's think about today in contemporary times. What is the greatest challenge that we're facing in Israel? And as serious as Hezbollah is from the north with their 150,000 missiles poised, and as serious as the threat of Hamas may be, and as serious as ISIS may be in the northeast of Israel, as serious as Islamic Jihad may be coming from Jordan and wherever, and of course the head of the snake is Iran, and God forbid they should get nuclear weapons. As serious as all of that is, I think that the greatest challenge facing the Jewish people is we're divided. There used to be a time when speakers would speak, and if they were losing the audience, they would scream out, "And soon in our days may Jerusalem, the eternal, undivided capital of Israel, be united." And right away, the speaker, a woman or man, would get the audience, everyone would stand up and give an ovation. Now Jerusalem has become a point of conflict. The Temple Mount has become a point of conflict between different sectors of the Jewish community. There are those who very much favor settlements in Judea and Samaria. There are those who are opposed. And one looks at the Israeli political scene, we're very, very divided. And what we can do to ourselves, no enemy can do. I really do believe that there is no enemy that with God's help can defeat us. The only one who can defeat us is we ourselves. And we're so very divided. That doesn't mean that everybody has to agree with my position. You've heard me say this before, that the test of unity is not how we get along when we agree, but how we get along when we disagree. Just as the test of love in a family is not how we love each other when we agree, but how do we love each other when we disagree? So I just want to show you, let's take a look at the book of Yechezkel, which is, the Haftorah is always a parallel narrative to our portion of the week. Let's take a look at chapter 37, sentence 15. I just want to read to you a little bit. And let's see it up on the screen. Yechezkel, Ezekiel, chapter 37. What does it say? Vayihi divar Adonai Elai lemor. The word of the Lord, Ezekiel says, came to me. Look what he says. Ve'ata, and remember that Ezekiel was the prophet during the time of the destruction of the first temple. So he knew what the vision was all about. Ve'ata v'en adam, kach lecha etz echad, uchtov alav liYehuda, v'livnei Yisrael chaverav. ולקח עץ אחד וכתוב עליו ליוסף עץ אפרים בכל בית ישראל חבריו. And you, O mortal, Yechezkel says, Ezekiel says, take a stick and write on it of Judah and the Israelites associated with Judah. Take a stick of Judah and the Israelites associated with him. And take another stick and write on it of Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, because from Joseph comes Ephraim, who was considered the lead son of Joseph, even more than Manasseh, and write on it Joseph and all of the house of Israel associated with them. And the next sentence, V'karav otam echad el echad. וקרב אותם אחד אל אחד, לך לעץ אחד, והיו לחדים בידיך. Bring them close to each other so that they become one stick, joined together in your hand, if I can face everyone. And then the prophet talks about the hope that this occurs. It's a hope. The truth of the matter is that the first prophets, they end. The book of Bereshit ends with the family together, but the prophets take us in reverse. We were at each other's throats. The 10 tribes had been exiled. Judah and the descendants of Joseph were basically in a kind of civil war. That's our challenge, to fix that division. And it's a challenge that it's an overwhelming challenge. It's not so simple. I close with this anecdote. At the first conference for Russian Jewry, Soviet Jewry, this goes back now to 1971, 1972. So there were about 6,000 people who gathered in Brussels.
You're okay?
If we can mute everyone, Shirley, thanks. Who gathered in Brussels, and there were 6,000 of us. And it was powerful. People from all over the world, not only the United States, not only from North America, but from Europe, from Australia, from everywhere, South Africa. It was a powerful moment of coming together. I mean, Ben Gurion was there. Ben Gurion, by 71, he was still alive, thank God. Begin was there. Begin, a lot of people didn't know who Begin was then. Begin became prime minister in 76, 77. And at the end, they opened up the plenum, and they allowed different people to speak. And I still remember there was this one young man who I still maintain contact with. We're both older now, but this is 50 years ago. He gets up and he says the following. I hope all good stories should be repeated, so something to think about. This is a story I haven't forgotten. He said, I come from Argentina, Buenos Aires, and some of you may have remember that in the 60s and the 70s, they had those decades of disappearance where they were fascists would take those who were rebelling against them, the people in the streets, take them up in airplanes and throw them out of airplanes. And it was difficult for everyone, but it was especially difficult for Jews. And this young man gets up and he says, I can tell you that in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, and on the outskirts, we travel the highways, and on the billboards, we see pictures of Hitler Yamach Shemo himself. Oto Aish, there he is. It was so fascist, so extreme. And he said that I, as a young Jew, I felt like I'm a nothing, like I'm a nothing. And then he went on to say that, here at this conference, being that I really don't know much Hebrew, I was taught how to read Hebrew. And someone taught me that the smallest letter in the alphabet is the Yud, the little Yud. You write it from the top down, the Yud. And he continued, and I learned that in Yiddish, the word for Jew is Yid, the Pintele Yid, the small Jew. And he said that in Buenos Aires, he felt like a Pintele Yid. He felt like a nothing. He was overwhelmed. And then he concluded by saying, but I've also learned that if you write one Yud next to another Yud, it spells the name of God. In unity, we are expressing the ultimate unity of God. And with that unity, we're going to make it. And I think this is the message of the readings of the week, which we're engaged in now. It's the brothers who are at each other's throats, and they make peace, but it's unraveled in the prophets. And our challenge, like what we had been discussing before, to answer the unanswered questions is to fix that division. What does it mean? I once drafted what I called an ethics of dissent, how we should disagree with each other. There should be rules of disagreement, rules like the ability to listen to the other. Here I'm really talking to myself because I've been guilty of not listening so many times, of listening to each other, not impugning the other side's motives. What does that mean? Recognizing that the other side, for example, when it comes to Israel, there's great dispute about the future of Israel. I was a big right-winger. Murray and I used to have long discussions about this. And I learned a lot from Murray because I started listening to him. But as a right-winger, I used to think, I'm the only one who loves Israel. I don't want to give away an inch of Israel. And it took me time. This goes back many years, but going back 25 years, I finally learned that those who are ready to make peace by giving away land, they don't love Israel any less. Rabin didn't love Israel any less. Rabbi Amital, Rabbi Lichtenstein, Murray didn't love Israel any less. Not to impugn the motives of others. And also, I think the real challenge is, can I learn from someone with whom I disagree? That's the key. Real unity is that we have what to learn from each other, even those with whom I'm very, very strict. That's not so simple. It's got, so when we're calling for unity, it's not calling for a oneness, a uniformity. No, it's calling that we live as brothers and sisters despite our differences. And somehow we come together and move forward. And that's the challenge. Just as there are unanswered biblical questions that must be answered, just to summarize, that we're all asked at every moment, Hayeka, may we be able to say, Hineni, here I am. That all of us are being asked, Hashoma Ochi Anochi, am I my brother's keeper? We have to answer in a declarative way. We are our sister's keeper. We are our brother's keepers. And every generation we have to ask to the question, Ha'od Avichai, is Abba still alive? We have to cry out, Am Yisrael Chai, Od Avinu Chai. The answers are not in the Bible because that's what the Bible is about. The Bible, the Talmud, is not a book of answers as much as it's a book of questions, leaving it up to every generation to answer those questions. Will we be divided as Jacob's sons and children were divided? That's the challenge. Let the day come that on one stick, the prophet speaks in metaphors and poetry. On one stick, write Judah, on the other one, write Joseph, and bring them together, graft them. V'hayu le'etz echad, halavai, halavai. So we'll take some final comments and we'll call it the 9th day of Chanukah. Anyone, Fern, any thoughts on this?
I think
The
you're
only
asking
thing that
too
I
much.
keep thinking of is,
Yes.
I don't remember how many years ago, but Joseph's tomb, I believe, is in Shechem in Nablus,
Yes.
and it was destroyed by the Palestinians
Yeah.
back when, during the Intifada. So talking how you're speaking now, I wonder, I don't really think it's been rebuilt to the level that it was originally in, but
Yes.
it might be an opportunity for some very brave people to speak with the Palestinians there and rebuild it together. Just a
Yeah.
thought.
Yep. It's been rebuilt, but as you said, nothing, not like it was, and that's still going on very much. Anyone else?
I hate saying this, but I think you're going against human nature, because each one is so involved in his own or her own thoughts and ideals that when you see, I mean, you're the shining light who says, yes, let's get together. But how many people are following you? I don't like to be negative, but I'm afraid this is the way it is, because people are so strong in their beliefs and in their feeling. And
Right.
you know whom I'm thinking about.
Right.
But
Well, you know, I come from, my history is that I would say until the mid 80s, and by the mid 80s, I was already in my mid 40s. I really felt that I had the answers. No one else had the answers. And then I went through this metamorphosis. I was very much influenced by, it's not that I'm not a right winger, I am on the Israeli right. And I've written about this, that I, with all the criticism of this government, and I have great concerns on many, many levels, I think it's important to give it a chance. And, but I look, for me, spirituality is that I'm not preaching the norm. I'm saying things that are a little bit, that are outside of the norm. And that's what it's about. And it's not easy. I do want to leave you just with one story about Rabbi Chaim Druckmann, who was the father of the religious Zionist movement, who died and was buried yesterday. There were tens of thousands of people at his funeral. Have any of you heard of his death? Druckmann was a very interesting man, and he really, I think I'm mentioning now, especially because, you know, the religious Zionist movement, like the Orthodox, modern Orthodox movement in America, split. I'm in the very open modern Orthodox movement, the more liberal movement. And then there is part of modern Orthodoxy, which is centrist, which is to the right. The religious Zionist movement in Israel is also split. The Smotroviches and the Ben Gvirs, they're very, very,
they're dangerous people.
very, very, very to the right. But there are many religious Zionists who are much more open, much more liberal. And Chaim Druckmann had a way, he had strong opinions, but he straddled the fence of both of those movements. But just one story about him, which speaks to some of the issues we're talking about now, especially unity. In the late 70s and early 80s, I was especially close with the right wingers, and with Chaim Druckmann as an example. And Rabbi Druckmann, for example, in the 1982 war, he actually picked me up in my parents' home in Netanya, and he was kind enough to take me into Lebanon, deep into Lebanon, to visit troops, his students. And I had that kind of relationship with him. And my mother died in September of 1983, and I was just beside myself. And I still remember to this day, we were burying my mother, and it was a cold afternoon, and the grave was open, about to be covered. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Rabbi Druckmann appeared. He had heard about my mother's death, and he came. He came. And he was the last one to speak before my mother was buried. But I want to tell you what happened then. After he spoke and my mother's holy body was covered, you know, there's a custom which you may be familiar with. We make shurot, we make two lines, and the mourners walk through the two lines. Now, as a rabbi, this is Aleph Beis to us, although very seldom am I at a cemetery because I'm a Kohen. I've been near on the outskirts, so I've seen it. So they make two lines for us. And I'm with my siblings. So I have two brothers, and so and Tova was there. Sorry, for different reasons, was not. That's another story. Thank God our love is so strong. And I said, Tova, walk with me through the lines. Tova is the matriarch of our family, the genius author. She's considered one of the great fiction writers of our time. You should Google her name, Tova Reich, R-E-I-C-H. And she's kind of hesitant because she says, oh, this looks like it's a man thing. I said, no, Tova, come with me. So we're walking through, and suddenly there was an older rabbi. He calls out, very sternly, he calls out, Rak HaGvarim, Rak HaGvarim, only the men. And at that point, Tova is so sensitive, she walks out of the line. Literally, as she's walking right through in the middle, she walks out. And as she walks out, I walked out with her. I was not going to walk out if Tova couldn't walk out. But I remember that Rabbi Chaim Druckman walked up to Tova and said, I'm so sorry that this occurred. And for this individual, I ask that you forgive him somehow. He was wrong, but let there be forgiveness now. Now, I don't know his positions on the women's issues. I really don't know. He was at the shul, he was at our home many times, but that showed something, that he got it. That to me was an expression of, was an expression of the whatever one's feelings on this issue, that the should come together. In fact, Tova, just see if I can bring it up. I may be able to find it. When she heard of the death, she wrote, let me see, I should be able to find it. Give me just 1 second. She has a way of saying it in her own way. Here it is. She wrote, this is what she wrote to all of her siblings. At our mother's funeral, when it was time for mourners to walk between two lines, and people say, Hamakom Yenachem Etchem, and Avrami, that's me, encouraged me to walk with him, even though I was reluctant, because the lines were made up of men only. And I started walking with Avrami, and very soon one of the men in the line was yelling, Rak HaGvarim, only the men, only the men. And I left the line, and Avrami left with me. It was Chaim Druckman of blessed memory, who came over to me to say that he asks forgiveness, Ani mevakesh mechila, for that man. I have not forgotten that moment 40 years ago. Whoa. And by the way, when that happened, Tova was then honored to write the Horrors columns. Remember the Horrors columns in the Times? So
Yes.
she wrote a piece, My Mother, My Muse, and I knew this was somewhere it appeared in one of those columns. And yeah. So I want somebody else.
I'm sorry,
to have the
Avi.
last word.
I can't agree with you. I just can't agree with you, because one person like Rabbi Druckman did his thing. It doesn't take away the fact that that horrible man just pointed out the inequities of what happens among people who are so narrow-minded and so thinking.
Right.
I mean,
right.
you've got great thoughts, but it ain't so. I'm
Right.
sorry to disagree with you, but it hurts. It hurts. I would never forgive them.
Oh, that's terrible.
But when you're a dreamer, you not only see the world as it is, but the world as it could be, and the responsibility to do our small share to reach a realization of a dream. Yeah. Good. On that note, on this 9th day of Hanukkah, anybody else want to have the last word? Robert, in the cold, do you have a word that can warm us up? No? Howard, Caroline? I love watching the two of you together. You should take a picture of it. It's beautiful. For many, many, more years you should take care of each other. Yep. I was thinking all through Toby's rehabilitation, thank God we're here for each other, but not everybody has somebody there. And it's just reminds us of the importance of staying connected. Really, really important. Okay, I see Iris's picture there. Edith, any
Mhm.
thought?
No, I'm surprised that Estelle with her usual self.
No,
I'm sorry.
Estelle only means
I
good.
just can't forgive people like that who are
Yeah.
so narrow-minded and so unthinking and uncaring of a person's emotions.
Right. I do want to say that the 5 volumes are supposed to come out pretty soon.
Oh, great.
And
Oh,
Edith actually went through it and made a major stylistic suggestion. Not all the suggestions works, but this was a major suggestion that have to keep the names in English and keep them consistent, and caused a rewrite, but Edith, we're very grateful. So on that note,
when is it coming out? So when is
Lance, couldn't agree with you more. Come on, I need your voice.
I'm
Lance.
with Estelle all the way. I'm sorry.
Oh, with Estelle. I thought you were
Oh,
with
dear.
me.
Sorry. On this point, everything else, I'm right behind you, Avi.
No, it's okay. All right, everybody, Yep. I love you all. Stay warm. be
love you too.
careful.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, God bless.
There should be
Take
more
care.
like you. There should be more like you, Avi,
No,
and
not
not like
really.
other
Believe
people.
me. Ayeka,
That's-
ayeka.
that's what makes the world That's what
God
makes
bless
the
you.
world beautiful.
So stay well, everybody. Sue, everybody. Iris, Rebbe. Take care, everyone.
That's it? Don't you have another class?
I thought so. Let me see.
I don't think so, is there?
Is Ezra on today?
No.
Oh, no, Ezra? Oh, so there's no other class.
No, his class is canceled. It says so on the email this morning.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. But long live Avi. I mean, if everybody were like him, what a great world it would be.
Right, but he's Rav Avi is very unique, one of a kind, and
He's one of a kind, let's face it. Could you
right.
forget if you're at, God forbid, a parent's funeral, you have the nerve to cry out this idiocy? I mean, really?
Well, look,
Really?
I was just at such a funeral yesterday.
Oh,
The
dear.
one like he was describing, I was at one just yesterday where they allowed, the men to go to the burial and they asked the women to stay outside. But the thing is, when a private person makes an event and the private people are paying for it, they have the right to do it any way they want, whether we agree with it or whether we disagree with it.
Well, this was not, I don't know. I don't know enough to argue. I only know that I emotionally, I find it very disagreeable. So, it's the way it is.
But like you said, it's the way it is, and it's
So when they once they wouldn't allow even any women to come to the funeral at all. Oh, well. Good night, everybody. I mean,
all right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
yeah. I'm trying to leave. How the devil do I leave?
Leave.
It won't, there's no place for me to leave, Wilma.
Touch the screen and the leave button should appear.
It didn't. I touched the screen and a leave did not join, did not appear.
Well, maybe they've already ended it.
Well, it did end, but
So then there's nothing to leave.
I didn't.
You're the only one who's on.
No,
Just
Okay,
you.
okay, I was made host, so if I leave, everybody leaves unless I make one of you two
No.
hosts.
And end it.
Okay, so
also
I'm ending,
end it, Robert.
I'm ending it, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.